people say you are what you eat. That's not true. You're what you digest, assimilate, and fail to eliminate. So even if you're eating this highly nutritious anti-inflammatory diet, if you're not digesting it, you are creating toxicity, not healing.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Christa Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. Today on The Less Stressed Life, we have Amy Rawls, who's a registered dietitian nutritionist specializing in integrative and functional nutrition with a focus on root cause resolution and mind-body optimization. In practice since 2010, Amy holds certifications as a functional medicine nutritionist, certified gastrointestinal nutritionist, and certified enzyme therapist. She currently serves as Director of Clinical Services and Education at Transformation Enzyme Corporations, where she oversees clinical education programs, tech support, and research and development. Amy has presented nationally and internationally on nutrition and enzyme therapy, combining current science with food-first enzyme supporting approach to healing. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I met Amy at a dietitian retreat. Is it
So
2
fun.
years ago? Oh my gosh, it was 2 years ago. And she's a fun time. And we got into some nerdy side conversations about enzymes, and the rest is history. And here we are. That's what happens when you get in rooms with people and you're making sourdough together. You're just jabbering about enzymes, making herbal tinctures on the side, talking about enzymes. So it's actually funny it's taken us this long to get together, because I'm pretty sure we probably talked about having you on the show at that time. But to be honest, I probably spent a year trialing and testing enzymes that Amy has been using or uses at her company. And so I'd love to hear a little bit, Amy, about your story on how you landed here. I know that you do have a personal story about this and like how you became obsessed and a lover of enzymes. And so I always think those are pretty fun, right? Your personal stories are quite relatable. So tell us a little bit about your story related to enzymes to kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. As an RD, I was trained allopathically, primarily at where I did my internship and grad programs. Really, everything we do in functional medicine was new to me. So it was around 2015. I was planning a wedding. I was very stressed, as you can imagine. I had a horrible boss at the time. I was very stressed at my job, and I was starting to get lots of GI issues that no matter what supplements I was taking at the time, I was doing a lot of like micronutrient testing and thinking, oh, I have these different nutrient deficiencies. Let me take all these different supplements to fix that. And some things did get better, but I was still having a lot of gas, a lot of bloating. My skin, which I've been very blessed to have good skin. I was breaking out and like, what is going on? I was contributing it to stress. And then my thyroid started to go haywire, losing hair, all the things that happen when we're stressed. And that's the title of your podcast. So I'm sure you talk about stress a lot. But it wasn't until, so I was talking to my rep at SpectraCell, that was the testing I was using. And she was like, have you ever tried enzymes? And I was like, no, I didn't know you could supplement those things. I know we make them, but I didn't know you could supplement. So she introduced me to this little company in Houston, Texas called Transformation Enzyme Corporation. So I got in touch with them, and they sent me what is called their Healthy Gut Program, or their foundational support kit, which includes a digestive enzyme, a proteolytic enzyme for that systemic support, and a probiotic. I took that kit only, quit taking everything else. And within 3 days, the gas was gone, the bloat was gone, my energy was better. And then within 2 weeks, my skin was starting to clear. Literally all of my symptoms that I had been spending, I'm not kidding you, I had probably 15 different supplements from other brands in my cabinet. And I was spending probably $300 to $400 a month on this type of stuff and not really getting the results. And as I'm sure your listeners can attest to, that's probably happened to them. And then it's like, what are we doing here? Why don't I just go use a pharmaceutical that my insurance will cover? So I switched to that. And after a month, so many of my symptoms had gotten better. I was like, okay, I've got to tell everybody about this. So then I started to just gradually start implementing them more and more to my practice at the time, because I was working at a bariatric center specializing in surgical and non-surgical weight loss. And my clients were coming back to me like, I don't know what this stuff is you're giving me, but oh my gosh, they felt so much better. It was actually facilitating weight loss for my bariatric people and the non-surgical as well, and just really helping alleviate a lot of the symptoms that they were having. And from then on out, I was like, okay, this makes everything so simple, because I was just using that little foundation kit and everybody's symptoms were just going away. And I wasn't even having to do as many supplements. So compliance got better, all those things, because people could afford the protocol and also stay compliant with it, because it wasn't a whole lot of different things that they had to remember taking at all these different times. And I did that. I worked just as a practitioner that was purchasing their products for about 2 years, until they reached out to me and were like, hey, we've noticed that you do pretty well with your sales of this kind of stuff. And wanted to see if you'd be interested in joining our team and being kind of head of our education department, clinical services. And it was the perfect, I actually turned the job down initially. And then 3 months went by and I cried probably every week I've just felt like I had missed this huge dream opportunity. So I called them back 3 months later to see if the position was still there. It was. They took me on in 2017 and the rest is history. So it's been moving and grooving ever since. And I have become completely obsessed with them because I've seen the clinical outcomes that they bring. And really just because you can kill so many birds with one stone. And because we know at the end of the day, majority of disease, everything's going to tie back to the same place. And that's the gut. It just makes sense to start there.
Yeah, I love origin stories. I just think it's fun. And something else I love to highlight as I interview a lot of clinicians and intelligent people that make big career shifts at different points. And it's always interesting to hear how that sort of happens for them.
Yeah.
And you gave an example of something I've lived by is often I remember I was helping one of my dietitian friends with a job she hated. I was like, why don't you reach out to people you like and ask them if they have work? But before we even turned the recording on, I was telling you how it will be fine if on my tombstone they write like no one was digesting, because this is the origin of so many things. But we stereotypically think of things. We think if we're not having seen undigested food in the stool that we're digesting. And it's if you're having nutrient absorption issues, fundamentally it's digestion absorption, right? And understandably, right? Just like you, I started what made logical sense to me as a dietitian with food sensitivity work. And then I ended up like deeply into nutrient work, micronutrient testing. And it was fun because it did work, but it's a second. And some people, I will say the last 5 years, especially, people are more depleted in nutrients, and nutrients do make the world go round. So you do need nutrients. And of course, if you're digesting, then you're absorbing more nutrients. But that said, sometimes people do need nutrients first every once in a while. But generally, if we're just doing nutrients and we're not addressing how you're digesting, absorbing that, then we're not being root causative for sure. Kind of it makes sense. Yeah, exactly. And so it makes sense, right? Because it's like we're all a product of kind of our previous experiences. And so, of course, for us, even in school, it makes sense that we're like, oh, well, improve your diet, or, oh, fix the nutrients, until these other pieces is, oh, of course, the physiology, I've got to digest. And I always say, to your point about your experience with your skin stuff, if you have a skin issue, you probably have a digestion issue, right? Because stuff just shows up. The skin is a safe place for your body to dump trash. Let's get into enzymes a little bit. So we've had a couple episodes here and there about enzymes, but the thing is, talking about stereotypes, we have stereotypes about enzymes and using those with food. Now, at the company you work for, we actually blow that open and use enzymes just in different ways. And so I want to talk a little bit about protease or proteolytic enzymes, what those are, and utilizing enzymes with food or outside of food, just to set the landscape for us about types of enzymes, because unfortunately, it's like we may not really, you don't know what you don't know, and there's different types of enzymes. And so let's talk about types of enzymes and then their use with food, without food, because I think generally most of us would assume that, and maybe people could assume that we're all making our own enzymes. I like to remind people that enzyme function is the first thing to go out the window under stress, always. It's a huge issue, and it allows for other kinds of gut infections and things to take over. Any kind of, like with Amy's story about bloating is a digestion issue, right? It's like you're not digesting, so you're now fermenting. But anyway, let's talk about types of enzymes. And then our stereotype is that we might use enzymes with food. But what I think is novel about where you work is that there's actually a lot of use of enzymes outside of food.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's different types of enzymes and a lot of people like to generalize enzymes and that creates a lot of confusion too. We specialize in supplemental enzymes, but there are obviously metabolic enzymes, which you cannot make. They cannot be made because those are internal within your body. However, digestive enzymes are a big part of your body's ability to make metabolic enzymes, right? Because those metabolic enzymes require nutrients to be created. So they still fit in that way. But you have your metabolic enzymes, you have digestive enzymes, and then there are the types that you can get. It can be either supplemented either from an animal source, which is a really common one, but this is where a lot of confusion comes in when it comes to like negative feedback loops. Then there's mycelial, and then there's plant. So transformation enzyme, they specialize in mycelial and plant enzymes, right? We don't work with any animal-based enzymes because animal-based enzymes are not able to withstand the harsh pHs of the stomach. Therefore, they require enteric coating. And when you work with the chronically ill, like we don't want to add any additional excipients or layers that could add to that toxic burden that these people are already experiencing. So when it comes to the different digestive blends or the digestive enzymes that we use, those are going to be a mycelial derived from a mycelial source, either Aspergillus oryzae or Niger, or it would be for a lot of our systemic formulas, the proteolytics, we get those from plant, like bromelain, for example, which comes from the pineapple, and then papaya or papain, which comes from the papaya. Those are your plant-based enzymes, and plant-based enzymes are typically more alkaline. So from a digestive standpoint, not ideal because you want to have a blend of acidic and alkaline enzymes in there because so you're hitting all facets of digestion. Like our systemic formulas, we're using more alkaline proteases, for example, because those are intended to work in the blood. And enzymes work on almost like what's a bell curve. They have different pH ranges in which they work. And at the top of that bell curve is where their activity is going to be the highest. For example, if you're using a protease, which is an enzyme that does degrade and break down proteins, right? That's what proteases will do. It's not going to do a whole lot for you in the blood because its key pH range where it's really going to get rolling is in that more acidic space, right? Whereas the blood should be 7, 8 is about as high as we go, but it should be more alkaline. So that's where those differences come in the types. Whereas animal, they are typically all alkaline. They really don't, like I said, they can't survive an acidic pH. So that's one reason we avoid them. Then there's sourcing and you get it from the animal. So now you have to worry, was the animal raised properly? What was the health of that animal at the time? And so at the birth of the company, when all this was happening, that's one of the big reasons our founder, Dickie Fuller, decided to stick in the mycelial space and the plant space because sourcing was safer and they had a much broader pH range that they could work in and it could help more people and keep those excipients out without bringing in the enteric coating. So those are the different types. And then as far as there's plant, mycelial, animal, and then you wanted to know what was the other part of the question? Maybe the differences?
Yeah, so I want to talk about types of digestive enzymes. And usually when most people talk about digestive enzymes, they talk about how these different enzymes digest different foods. And you brought this whole other conversation to it where no, I'm talking about animal versus plant-based enzymes, proteolytic versus protease enzymes, protease digesting proteins, etc. Did you tell us the source of protease enzymes?
Yes, ours are sourced from Aspergillus oryzae, Aspergillus niger, and then they also come from bromelain, which is pineapple, and then papain, which is from papaya. And what's unique about those, even in like which I know we'll get to this, I'm probably jumping ahead, in our latest research, our lead researcher, we've actually been able to conclude what areas of health those sourcings of enzymes work best in. For example, your Aspergillus species, they really shine in the pain and inflammation space, whereas bromelain, we're seeing a lot of really good, that's really the one we're seeing the most benefit when it comes to cancer. And then when it comes to autoimmune disease, for example, that's where papain is really starting to shine. So that's cool and unique too, are some of the things that we've been able to hone in on and see where they really shine the most. But that's just the proteolytics, which are going to help you obviously degrade proteins. But what's unique about proteases is we call them systemics because they leave the digestive system and can work. They travel through your blood to go wherever the body is signaling them to go. They're not adaptogens, but they work like adaptogens. They move with the ebbs and flows of your body versus, for example, a lot of NSAIDs and different drugs that are out there that people use for inflammation shut off inflammation. Proteolytics do not do that. They quench it, but they also modulate it. So they don't completely shut it off because we need inflammation. We don't want to turn that signal off. And so that's the beauty of those proteolytics, is that you aren't inhibiting that signal. You're actually modulating the body to regulate itself, and it quenches inflammation that way. And we've seen it work just as effectively as many of the drugs that are out there. And we do have research on that. But as far as our blends, like I was saying, when using a protease for a digestive purpose, we're going to use, typically those are going to be sourced from the aspergillus, because they typically can go in a lower pH, right? And we want to hit, they can go to a pH as low as 2. And so we want some of those, like the protease 4.5, protease 3.0, some of those in there because they're more acidic, highlighted there, versus we also blend in the 6.0s. And the other one is we have peptidase in there, papains, because those work in a more alkaline pH. So once it starts to get to the small and large intestine, those proteases really get kicking when it comes to like our digestive formulas. And I think that's what makes transformation so unique, is when it comes to our digestives and our systemics, which are just our straight protease formulas, the synergy of the blends is really key in making sure that we are achieving the goal. I compare all of our products, and I'm not trying to push just TEC stuff, but just in general for listeners, when trying to select a good digestive, it's really important that you know the types of proteases or types of enzymes that are in there, so you can make sure that you're getting a fully comprehensive formula. Because I see a lot that are using a lot of alkaline proteases in a digestive, and I'm like, where's your lower pH proteases to hit you there? Because that's going to take care of the digestion in the stomach, which is when we want those proteins, the breakdown of those proteins to start. We don't want to wait to have digestive support until it gets to the small intestine.
Yeah. So I have some questions about the first one I have, and I have some questions about protease versus proteolytic, because sometimes I feel like we were using those words interchangeably in the same conversation. So I'll clarify some things. But the first question is, your proteolytic enzymes are coming from papaya or pineapple. And so there's two kind of questions that come from this. This reminds me of the whole purpose of supplements in general is like dose, right? How much, because people might say, why don't I eat more of those foods to get these compounds to support my digestion? And so I want to hear about the difference between what you find in the supplement bottle versus maybe what is found in the plant, if you know it. Not that I'm not saying you have to know that, because that's a tricky thing, but that's generally, there's a lot of supplements come from plant compounds or extracts. It's just like in a much bigger dose. And then in general, so that's part of the question, but the other part of the question is also just related to dosing. That speaks to something you were just talking about, which is what happens if someone goes down to the corner market and is buying XYZ enzyme. If the first part of the conversation of what you hear is no one is digesting and they just go buy an enzyme, what is happening there? What are the dosing differences between something that's happening at your company versus maybe what on the shelf? They're pretty dramatically different.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Okay. So to the first question, this kind of falls into, and I do a whole webinar called Enzyme Myths and Facts, and I hit this question because we get that a lot. I don't need digestive support because I only eat raw, or I'll just eat more of this food. And while raw food does have enzymes it does have enzymatic activity, the enzymes that you get from the pineapple, for example, or from the papaya, or for whatever raw food you're eating, they're only specific to that food. And they help our own endogenous enzymes. They do help our own endogenous enzymes release. So there is some thermodynamic energy there that can come from your food. However, it really all depends on the nature of the raw food, the integrity of its structure, and how it was kept or maintained. When part of that plant is removed from that holistic environment that it was in, it can lose some of its enzymatic potential. Not to mention, not all enzymes found in raw foods are hydrolytic in nature. Only hydrolytic enzymes can break food molecules during the digestive process. And most plants don't contain enzymes they don't contain cellulase, hemicellulase, xylanase, and those others that we really need to help us properly digest all the different components from food, because we're animals, right? We don't have those different things. So having those hemicellulases and cellulases are a great thing to include in a digestive formula to help you properly break down those insoluble fibers efficiently. But it doesn't break it in with our formulas, for example, because a question might come up. I don't want to break down too much cellulose, right? Because we want fiber to pull the cholesterol and these other things out of the body. This is where the synergy of the blends come in. What is unique to ours is that synergy is there, and we put an amount in there that still allows for enough cellulase to be left over to be beneficial in a way without completely just running through all the cellulose by having too much cellulase in there and not getting the benefit of the fiber. But the other thing is, when it comes to, do I just go eat a whole bunch of pineapple? It's mainly just that you're not guaranteed that you're going to get that thermodynamic synergy that you would versus when it's extracted, because, it's grown off the pineapple. We extract the protein because that's all enzymes are. They're just protein that speed up and catalyze and break things down. That's all they do. And they're only in your system for, it depends on your metabolism, anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, which is why when it comes to a digestive enzyme, for example, you would take it before each meal, not one a day, because that activity is going to be gone, which this gets into your dosing question. What I love about working with enzymes, because I work with a lot of kids, babies, I work with infants, fresh out the womb, I'll work with these kids and put them on enzymes because they're safe from womb to tomb. You can literally, they're not based on age. Dosing is not based on age or weight. It's based on need. So when it comes to how do you dose, how much do you take, that has come with a lot of trial and error on my end, but also knowing just the strength of the formulas. For most people, for example, Digest, which is our most comprehensive formula, it's just 1 cap before each meal. And it's got a lot of enzymatic activity in there, right? And it typically does the trick versus stuff you'll see on the shelf in your regular pharmacy or wherever. You would have to take 3 to 4 of their capsules to equal one of ours. So the strength is significantly different. So while the price tag might look better, you're actually spending more. And most of those also have other excipients and things in there. And I've never seen any I didn't talk about these yet, but we've hit a lot on proteases. There's also lipases, which help you break down fat, right? Then there's your polysaccharides. You have I've mentioned some already, hemocellulase, cellulase, invertase, sucrase, what's the other ones? Glucoamylase, diastase, all of these different things to help you break down all the different components of your food. Because let's be honest, most of America isn't eating a raw diet. They're not even chewing. You have to chew to
I think that's it right there. They're not even
Right.
chewing. We're not even chewing. I'll just include
not even
myself
chewing,
sometimes.
guys.
Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, why am I done eating before everyone else? I feel like I finally made enough progress on that this year. I'm like, I am finally eating slower than everybody.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, yeah, we should be making our own enzymes and have plenty, but the truth is we're not. And I'm seeing it even when children come into this world because of moms not being supported properly while they're pregnant and while these children are in utero. Yeah, hopefully, did I cover the question?
So I think that makes sense. And I want to just I want to ask a couple questions about that because I work with a lot of kiddos with skin stuff. And something I'm always looking for when I'm going over the history is birth story, family history, but also like mom's health. The tricky part is that we stereotype like so much, right? We only think what we think. And it's so much easier when a mom's, yeah, I have had some history of gut stuff, right? It's easier when mom has had a history and she knows she has gut bloating or something like that, because I find that's very commonly there. Is usually we're actually sharing microbiota with our entire family, right? And so I see a lot of gut stuff in mom. It's no one's fault. It's just like we all can improve our digestion. And so is there a way, I know this is something you're just really interested in right now. You've done some presentations on this topic recently. And so I'm just curious on a couple little things around this. Something that might come up is people might say, can I test for this? Or how do I know that my enzymes suck? And then you also had some facts about enzyme capacity as infants, because I find it's very common. You will not be surprised by this. I'm sure you see this a lot. I find that it's very common that eczema starts shortly after kids start solid foods. And I don't think it's the food's fault. I just think we're just growing and developing as babies. And you had some facts about how quickly babies actually make enzymes or increase enzymes. So I'd love to hear, what would you say to a mom how do I know? How could I test? What would you say to that? And then second, what are some of those facts about how babies make enzymes on their own? It is hot weather season, and there is probably no better time than now to make electrolytes part of your daily routine. Electrolytes help you make energy and help get hydration into the cell so you aren't just peeing out what you put in. I've been drinking electrolytes for at least 5 years, and I'm always looking for a great tasting, high quality powder just to change up the flavors. This summer, I'm doing a lot of Electrolyte Supreme from Jigsaw. It's got a great complementary vitamin and mineral profile beyond the classic electrolyte minerals of potassium, sodium, and magnesium without any sugar or artificial colors. It tastes great, and it's probably my go-to for my kids, especially the lemon lime flavor as a hydrating lemonade for summer. You can get 10% off every single order at jigsawhealth.com with the code LESSSTRESSED10. That's Less Stress 10 to take 10% off of all of Jigsaw's incredible products, from Electrolyte Supreme to potassium and adrenal cocktails to cod liver oil and beyond. So go get yourself now and start hydrating.
Yeah. So how do you know? How do you test? So there's a few ways you can go about doing it. Testing can be expensive. That's the only thing. There's not actually like a blood test that you can do. Definitely some of the tests that I'll use to look at digestive capacity is like a stool test, for example. And I'll look at elastase, steatocrit. We'll look at things like zonulin. And some of the research we've done, we've used like Cyrex antigen testing, which looks also at gel lining permeability, the lactulose mannitol, things like that. But honestly, I do a lot of symptom questionnaire because I don't really care what a lab shows me, because let me tell you, even with my own personal story, I chased labs for 2.5 years, spent thousands of dollars, and even still, one of my labs, there was an error. And I'm like, there's no way this is right. So let me just say this about labs. There's still a margin of error there. So
We are completely aligned here.
Yeah, don't treat the lab, you treat the symptom. Because I've had people, their symptoms will be completely resolved, but they're so upset that their labs aren't just this picture perfect picture. I'm like, who cares? Like, this got better. That was what we were trying to achieve. I don't care what this lab says. So you can do that, but I actually just use a quick 1-page enzyme assessment questionnaire, because you've said this a couple of times already. So many people think, and I've had practitioners say, I don't really work with gut stuff. I don't see where enzymes fit. Or I've had people tell me, I don't know why I need an enzyme for XYZ. Believe it or not, pregnant women, guess where infertility is very heavily driven by your gut. Skin issues. That's where the beauty on the inside is a reflection of the outside. So if you are looking all inflamed on the outside, you're having all these skin eruptions, guess what? I guarantee you the inside is just as bad, probably worse, because you detox 4 ways: your colon, your skin, your kidneys, and your lungs. And if it's not coming out your colon, that's why when I work with eczema or really any skin issue, the first question I ask is, how often are you pooping? Are you having a bowel movement daily? Because guess what? If you're not eliminating those toxins daily, it has nowhere else to go but through your skin. So we definitely look at that, and that ties back to the gut. Same thing with hormone dysfunction, all the things. That's why I love working with enzymes, because they fit literally everywhere. And it makes my job very easy, because it's not just that they fit, but they work. Get the clinical outcomes because it's helping to eliminate that toxicity. We teach something called the ripple effect of toxicity and disease, which means we assume that we are what people say you are what you eat. That's not true. You're what you digest, assimilate, and fail to eliminate. So even if you're eating this highly nutritious anti-inflammatory diet, if you're not digesting it, you are creating toxicity, not healing. And so that's where a lot of that comes in. And that's always been my issue with the food sensitivity testing. Not that I don't think it's an effective tool, but it can be very restrictive. And I'm like, it's still not root cause.
Second.
Yeah.
That's the issue, is if your kid starts having sensitivities after starting to eat, you naturally are going to think it's food. I'm like, actually, it's digestion.
Yeah.
It's like how you're digesting.
You cannot convince me that broccoli is bad for a kid. I'm sorry. So I don't see, it's deeper than that, guys. It's because they're not breaking it down. And if you don't break your food down into a small enough kilodalton, it's going to elicit an autoimmune response. Yeah. And you got an allergy or you got a sensitivity, right? So
yeah. Everything you just said is like stuff I preach or talk about, I feel like, all the time. So thank you for it.
Yeah. Well,
highlighting.
you know where to go if you ever want to come. We can come
talk about it. I love when your Southern sass comes out too. It's good. It's just like just presenting a little bit there. And I will just mention as well, like with some of those stool tests, even those digestive markers, like steatocrit is not going to show up there all the time. It's even when it shows up there, you don't even know if it was just that day or something else. Yeah. And with elastase, it's actually supposed to be like on the stool test I used to use all the time. It's supposed to be over 600 is more ideal, but the reference range is 200. We're not even, and I will tell you, it used to show up low all the time. And then there were some changes at the lab, and then it started looking better. It was a number of years ago, there was a change with some of the lab markers, or it was like you almost had to reset what was normal at the lab because
Yeah.
they started to shift. To Amy's point, a test is a tool. And when we make it more important that our symptoms we're losing, we're totally losing, and we're going to be frustrated all the time. One more thing though, talk about how babies and more infants, our digestive enzyme capacity grows in time or in age, how we develop that in time. What's that timeline? Just a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like your pancreas buds, those started around like the 30th day of conception because your digestive system is one of the first things to develop, right? And so our duodenum and our jejunum, those crypts within our intestines. So the development of those starts around the 10th to 11th week of gestation. So what a lot of people don't know is that your propensity to digest for your digestive footprint for the rest of your life is set at that 9th to 11th week of gestation. And so if mom, for example, does not know that she is pregnant during, that early on, and she's filling her body full of junk, not taking care of herself, that's going to impact the digestive propensity of that child. Even the amount of protein that mom consumes throughout her pregnancy has an impact on the size of that child's pancreas, which is crazy to me. Like we think we all come out with the same size pancreas. We don't. It has a lot to do with how mom was eating and how mom was digesting while we were in utero. And so one of the things with kids, and you said you're seeing it, the skin issues erupt in kids when they start eating solid foods. Unfortunately, I'm seeing it much sooner because they're coming into this world already very toxic. The earliest case I worked with was a 1-month-old baby that was extremely constipated and just riddled with eczema, right? Couldn't tolerate mother's milk. Mom tried, which is also crazy to me, I can get into what we do about that. But I had to give that child enzymes. But we assume that when children are born that they're done, right? A child's digestive system is not complete with development until they are in teenage years. The villi of the small intestine are not done developing until they're in teenage years, right? Now, we know that the GI lining starts to close around that 24-month period around age 2, but even our enzyme output goes, we were designed, right? And I'm a spiritual person. I believe in God, and I don't think he messed up in how he created us. And we were created to develop in the flow of how food was supposed to be introduced to us. That's why when we were born, we have lactase is one of the first enzymes that we start to make. Mother's milk is much higher in lactase than, for example, cow's milk. Casein's another one. What's the biggest allergy we see in kids? A milk allergy. What are kids use? The number one formula kids are put on is a milk-based formula. Cow's milk is much higher in casein than human milk. And the reason for that is because we don't have some of the protease or those different proteolytics, peptidases, things like that to properly break down that amount of casein that early, right? But lactase is something we have a lot of early on because that's one of the highest components, or lactose is one of the highest components of mother's milk. So just even with the development of how we go, and amylase is another one. So I was talking to you about this. The amylase, we start to actually make amylase around 6 months of term birth, right? So this is after birth, right? The lactase and those different proteases, those are happening in utero. We don't start to make amylase, which is a polysaccharidic enzyme that is designed to help your body break down carbohydrates. Amylase breaks down starch, right? Even in baby books today, pediatricians are still telling mothers, if your baby's up, if they're colicky or they seem hungry, give them some cereal at night, right? This was definitely us 80s babies. We got a lot of cereal early on. But even the children now, I'm still seeing pediatricians and moms ask me about this. We don't even start to make amylase until 6 months old. And we're not at sufficient levels that are adequate enough to really break down the carbohydrates coming in from different foods until we're around 10 months, and full production starts around 15. Even pediatric GI docs have confirmed that. What happens when you introduce a food to a child too early that it does not have the digestive propensity for? That creates that ripple effect of toxicity, because if they can't digest it, those foods, instead of being broken down, the proteins are going to putrefy, the carbs are going to ferment, and the fats are going to turn rancid. And what that combination of all that does is it creates a lot of toxins and a lot of toxicity, which will eventually lead to inflammation. And then we know what happens once inflammation's there. Then we get
Anything.
anything. And the cells aren't getting fed either. So everything comes back to the health of the cell.
Yeah.
And so if our cells are in this very toxic environment, they're not getting the nutrients they need, guess what's going to happen? you're going to get disease. I don't know. There's 11 systems of the body, and whichever one's affected, I don't know. But the analogy I use a lot with clients is think of your body as a tree, right? And you have these 11 systems of your body, your endocrine system, which is regulating your hormones and all these different things, your nervous system for your neurotransmitters, all that stuff, cardiovascular. Those are all the branches to your tree. The digestive system is the trunk, right? And the soil for your tree is your lifestyle, right? And your diet. For the nutrients to make their way from the soil up the trunk, that trunk has to be functioning, right? So it can reach the other branches. If that trunk is full of holes, aka leaky gut, if it's full of inflammation and those nutrients are getting sucked up because there's so much inflammation there, they can't get to the cells where they need to go, you're going to get disease because those cells, those systems aren't being nourished. I think that's a big reason with kids. We see a lot of the issues is foods are being introduced too early, and they're not real foods as well. But yeah, we're not following the natural progression that we were designed to follow when it comes to food. And people can say, oh, formula is a life-saving thing, and it is. But guess what? We didn't have formula for a long time. You know what we use? We use wet nurses because we are designed for mother's milk. This is why definitely when I'm working with kids that are breastfed, we work with mom first and work on her digestive system to make sure that her milk is broken, has the different components in it so baby can tolerate it better. Sometimes we'll give it to the baby directly, but for formula fed babies, it is 100. I'm like, no, but they need the enzyme support. They don't have the enzyme capacity to break down this form of milk. Even if you're using like an elemental, it's foreign to what we're designed to have.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
We're talking about enzymes with food, but what I think is really interesting is some of the use of enzymes outside of food, which is a pretty novel concept for people. And so let's talk about when you take enzymes with food. So we could have talked for another half hour easily about just taking enzymes with food and utilizing that. But what I think is just super novel is the enzymes outside of food. And people might be like, what? Why would you take enzymes outside of food? Because there's other crap that could be digested. And this is where I started utilizing these types of enzymes in practice. Now, there's been literature, there's been evidence around using enzymes outside of food. I feel that the main one that shows up is around fibroids and serrapeptidase enzymes. Are there other ones that are a little bit more mainstream that maybe someone's provider would have heard about, or is that the one that strikes you as well?
No, because we actually see that with our proteolytic blends. So we don't use serrapeptidase, not because it's not a good enzyme. At the time, you have to remember transformation started in early 90s, right? 1991, I believe. But at the time, serrapeptidase was available, but one, it had to be enterically coated, which we don't do, and it was very expensive. And so Dr. Fuller, our founder, was like, wait a second, we have these here in the research. They're designed to basically do the same thing. They both bromelains, aspergillus-derived proteases, they all have the same fibrinolytic ability as serrapeptidase, lumbrokinase, nattokinase. Fibrinolytic activity is the same. There's never been a study done to show a side-by-side comparison of how they each work, but just looking at the mechanism of action and what they do from that anti-fibrinolytic, anti-inflammatory, anti-mucolytic, their ability to clean the blood, it's all the same. So what I can tell you is there are some downsides to some of those other ones. For example, when it comes to, so we're talking about systemics right now. So the digestives you take with food, systemics are what we refer to those enzymes you take away from food because we want them to work systemically, meaning through your blood. And what we've seen with some of the other forms is they have blood thinning capabilities. So they're not safe to be taken with blood thinners or those types of medications where our strains are because they're not blood thinning. They clean the blood, but they don't thin it. So those are some differences there. I would say as far as clinical outcomes, I have seen the same types of clinical outcomes using aspergillus-derived proteases from Rhizaeosae niger as well as bromelain and papain, as I've seen in the research with serrapeptidase and lumbrokinase and those others. They're all really beneficial. It just comes down to sourcing and stuff like that.
Okay, let's talk about where these get used. The concept is that we're using them outside of meals. So if you took these same enzymes with meals, they would digest the food that you're eating, but we're looking for them to digest and clean up crap in the body, and they're going to decide where they want to go. You talked about this earlier a little bit, but we hadn't gotten to this point yet, where you're like, it's like an adaptogen and the body uses it where it wants to use it, right? Or so you don't get to choose, hey, I've got this cyst right here. I'd like this to go away. It's like, it's going to go in and digest other stuff, right? And so let's talk about just very tactically what that might look like. So usually you're taking these at least what, 1+ hour away from foods, or is it longer?
So the way I do it, because compliance is a big thing. And the truth of the matter is the activity in one of our proteolytic capsules of our protease, for example, which is our strongest protease, is at over 600,000 HET, which is, just know this, it's a crazy amount of activity. Even if you took that with food, there's not going to be enough protein in your meal that's going to use up all that activity. So you will still get systemic support, because remember, the primary proteases in our systemic blends really get kicking in a more alkaline pH, right? But ideally, you do want to take them away from food so you get the most systemic support, because you will lose some activity on the food you're eating. And when I say activity, enzymes are measured by activity. They're not based by weight, like milligrams. All these units we see with vitamins, enzymes are completely different in how they're measured. So ideally would be, I tell people at rise, midday, at bedtime. Yes, 1 hour away from food would be great. But guess what? There are some people that cannot take a proteolytic enzyme on an empty stomach. And so at Transformation, we have different formulas that are based on the more sensitive individual, then we have the more therapeutic. But there are some people that even with our sensitive formula, they have to take it with food. I can't tell you exactly why that is. It's not common, but it happens. And we still get good clinical outcomes with them taking it with their meal because of, again, that blend having more of those alkaline in there to really hit once it's done with the meal. So that would be timing. But yes, ideal is away from food. And that's why I just say rise, midday, bedtime, because most people are waiting at least an hour before they eat breakfast. Not me, I eat as soon as I get up. But bedtime, that's typically away from food. And that honestly has worked the best for me when it comes to compliance. Now, with some of our more significant disease states, the big C word, people that are having to take a lot more, because the further you are in the disease process, the more support you'll need. And so those can be a little trickier to get in. But yeah, for the average person or just even regular diseases we see, that 3 times a day, 1 hour away is perfect.
I should underline that the more significant the condition or the longer you've had it, I find that the more intense or the more therapeutic, or again, it makes more sense. Like the lighter the issue is, the lighter the
Yeah.
intervention in general. It's just like a good thing to remember for us because our human brain doesn't always calibrate that way. Okay, I want to hear about, so there are some other like tricky things with dosing around protease enzyme, but let's talk about why someone would give a hoot about this. And so I'll share like why I maybe started utilizing these and how I'm using them, but then you have a very different angle of I'm using them for everything. I want to hear some of
Yeah.
the things that you guys use them for, or if you want to share like 1 or 2 case studies. For me, the case study after I met you, I started utilizing them for specifically, so I have like things I like to do with clients, right? Support, bringing the systems into balance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there are times where maybe a more advanced or significant disease state, for me, it was definitely irritable bowel disease, Crohn's and colitis typically is where I was typically using these. And so what would happen was we'd only get so far, or we sometimes call these refractory cases, where I'd like the progress to be farther than it is and it where I want it to be. So I started utilizing protease enzymes or these enzymes outside of meals to digest other crap overall. And I learned a lot from Amy along the way. But it was like around maybe 6 caps a day divided over a few times. And you needed to use it. It took about probably, I don't know, it was between 3 to 6 weeks to start to see those changes, to start to see those results. But something very interesting I've seen with pretty much all IBD was just different mucus in the stool. So that would ebb and flow and then dissipate for pretty much all of these clients. And that's like a thing that people are usually seeing in the stool. That's kind of part of the disease process. And so I'm seeing that sort of dissipate. And then, yeah, I use this on like multiple IBD clients. And so as far as I know, like I think every single one of them had positive outcomes. Now, that said, we did need to use it longer. I remember someone stopping and then she's, oh, the blood came back in my stool. I was like, okay, cool. You saw it go away when you were on the proteolytic enzymes. You really need to be on them for a minimum of 3 months. So that's another reason why and where I tend to use these is maybe different than what Amy does, just because of the timeline. And I'm just sharing this because it's like nice to know what these outcomes look like. They've been extremely favorable and it just takes some time. And for me, I don't like to have people on other products too much at the same time because I want to know that it's these
Right.
enzymes that are working, right? And it's also just enough of a supplement load, right? Whereas like you can only give people so many things as well, right? You want to try to make their life as easy as possible. So that was where I started to use them, but Amy's got all kinds of different things. And I know they have lots of different case studies. So tell us
Yeah.
about some of the common places, some of the places that you see them being used, or if you want to share a couple of case studies, just so we can understand, like, why would anyone care about this? What would we use it for?
Yeah. And I can definitely try to loop it all in together. For example, we've done a few case studies with long haulers. We know that the systemic enzyme blends that we work with They've been shown to overcome the cytokine storm. They have immunosuppressive activity to them. We definitely, we're talking about cleaning things up in the blood, biofilm disruptor. So let me start with use protease. Protease is a desert island product for me. If I was stuck on an island and I had to pick one product, this is what I would bring, because it's going to really, it does so many different things. It's going to help degrade and break down biofilms, which is going to expose those different pathogens and viral things of that nature. Very effective biofilm disruptor. It is great at reducing, detoxifying the blood and helping remove viruses from our circulation. They aid in the destruction of cancer cells. We have 3 different case studies on using proteolytic enzymes. We're playing around with megadosing actually, and we hope to possibly have this megadosing powder available in 2026. Because what we've also found is we've just been scratching the surface at dosing people at maybe like 12 caps a day for cancer. We've done 1 on prostate and 1 on breast cancer. I think we have 2 breast cancer. And we basically were able to completely shrink a tumor. And we can validate that it was the protease that was doing it, because the only change in the therapy was the megadose that we were giving, which is the megadose was equivalent to 60 caps a day, which is also what our founder, Dickie, healed her cancer. She had cancer 3 times. Never did chemo, never did radiation. She just took a lot of protease, cured it, or got rid of it. And when she did pass in 2019, it wasn't from cancer, ironically. So just that alone. But we're working with some different partners right now to do a larger scale study to show this on the use of, and it's specifically the bromelain is what we're focusing on for that ability to destruct those cells, enhance the immune cells, kill bacteria, all that kind of stuff. Enzymes, they can break down immune complexes and block immune cells. They accelerate, again, that blood fluidity. I use them a lot in autoimmune disease as well, because they are very effective at dealing with the cytokine storm and all those different inflammatory markers that we typically see elevated in autoimmune disease. And I can do that with one product versus a whole lot of different things. And so I'm trying to think of other uses. I had a vitiligo case study that we were doing, which vitiligo is incredibly hard to treat, even with medication, with pharmaceuticals. And I was, through his stool testing, we did see definite changes there, but he also had H. pylori that he was never able to clear. We cleared that with the protease. And then also his vitiligo, while not completely resolved, it was the most improvement he had seen in 10 years. Because again, vitiligo is autoimmune, guys.
Yeah. How long did it take?
That was that was 3 months.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad at all for him to have those results.
This is the guy I was telling you about at farm camp. Remember I told you how he pooped out all those worms?
Oh, yeah. I didn't remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy, this case study, I put him on the megadose, and he was only at the initial dose, which is 10 grams, which is probably about, probably like 20 caps.
Did you have an experimental powder you were able to give them? Is that what you're saying? Because I love, or were you using the caps? Because I love that you are mentioning, oh yeah, it's 20 caps. And that's one of the reasons where it's like, sometimes you want this to be the only intervention, in my opinion, because it's like, it is a handful of caps.
It is, but it's, hey, you're not taking anything else. And it's a lot cheaper than chemo and all this other stuff that would happen if you're not doing all this preventative stuff. The protease, it has the ability to clean the terrain. So anyway, with this individual, at that time, that's about what he was taking. And within 1 week of being on that protocol, pooped out tons of worms, parasites, right? Because again, it's that protease was probably breaking down those different biofilms so the immune system could identify it, see it, kill it.
Was he feeling like garbage right before that though? Because usually if you're going to disrupt biofilms, I remember I had someone who had a cyst that had developed during our time together. There was 100% mold history, but probably exposure. And so because she was past her initial protocol, but she had shared with me she had this cyst in an uncomfortable place, I was like, okay, let's try. I feel like this was the perfect use for enzymes. Like, it's breaking down crap. Can we guarantee it's going to break down that crap? Because it's going to go break down whatever crap is the priority in the body. But what happened to her, unfortunately, we caught it, and just one of those things, like, hopefully we don't have too many things going on so we can catch the thing. She had all of these kind of fungally, moldy symptoms come up. Like, I was fine. And then shortly after starting this, I was like, oh, you were breaking open biofilms, right? You were liberating that stuff. So I share that because it's just good to acknowledge. I think we have to normalize, hey, there's opportunities to bind that up so that trash isn't all over the place. But it is possible to take something that is helpful and to have something that doesn't seem helpful happen along the way. And then we have to make sense of it physiologically. And then, of course, resolve the negative stuff, because it'll make our human behavior is to quit.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's honestly why I'm not going to say never, but we've never gone retail with our line because this is a therapeutic line, right? This isn't some stuff you're going to get over the counter at Walmart. These are designed for practitioners, favored by practitioners, but safe for families. But when it comes to our stronger formulas, now we have gentler proteases, right? So for example, we have a product called Pure. That's our gentle systemic. And that's what I'll usually start babies on, or really sensitive people that are, because I'm concerned of a Herx or a Herxheimer, which is what's going to create kind of those detox symptoms. But what's cool or what's unique about the case studies that we were doing, we were really worried that when we megadosed, right? Because we've seen people Herx off of just 2 protease capsules. And here we are, we're about to give people the equivalent to 20 caps at one time. Not a single person. And we did about 5 different case studies with our powder. Not a single person Herxed the entire time, which our theory is this is that scratching the surface with just 2 or 3 or even 12 a day. We were poking the ant hill versus wiping it out.
Interesting.
And so when we megadosed it, those side effects, they didn't feel any of it. And I've always said that you can never take too much, but you can always take too little. And Vicki said that too. And that's just what we saw with it. So nobody Herxed at the higher dose, which was crazy.
Yeah, that is super interesting. Yeah. And you know what I kind of love about it is like we can remind ourselves that even though it's a supplement, it's a handful of things, it is derived from natural source, from nature. And it's just using the power of nature in these really therapeutic doses. So I just think I always love a good dress with pockets or a Swiss Army knife that works on multiple things. And what's interesting to me, I'm ready for the powder to come out because I think selling 60 caps or 20 caps to someone is a hard sell and it's expensive. And this brings me to one other thing around, I'm curious how you're stabilizing the powder, because the reason for the capsule is because of this does not, like, you can't just put this in water and drink it down. What's the situation with stability overall? It might relate to what you were talking about earlier of the stability of enzymes, but like, how are you protecting, like how you have to take it and how you can't just stuff in liquid and why not?
Yes. Yeah. So enzymes they're hydrolytic, which means they activate with water. So the minute they touch, or at least the ones we work with, really all of them are, but once they hit liquid, they're going to activate. So when I keep saying activity, right? So there's 600,000 units of activity in one of our protease capsules, for example. I think of the activity as the number of spins that they have, right? And once those spins are done, they're recycled or eliminated. This is why you cannot overdose on these products, right? You can't. It's impossible because they don't stay in your system. They either get eliminated or because they're proteins, they get recycled by the body and used for something different. So when it comes to the stabilization of them, they are very fine and flaky, and like even when they're at the manufacturing level, they have to have stabilizers in there because they're just so light and they'll just go anywhere. So for the powder, the challenge and the reason we haven't launched it yet, that we're trying to figure out how to, one, keep the liquid out because we have the desiccant packs and stuff in there, but it's also the taste of it as well. And to your point of 60 capsules a day is a hard sell, it is. That's why we're like, we need a powder because we need to dose people higher. Now, the majority of people, even, again, we've been working with very severe disease processes for a very long time, just with our capsules at these lower doses and seeing good results. But we do believe that if we can get this powder in the hands of more people, we can really make some positive change. And that's our goal. It's just all of the red tape that we have to go through to provide a natural solution. A lot of people out there don't like that, especially when it's one of the most profitable conditions that Big Pharma has. So we have to be careful. And that's been the struggle with getting the funding and stuff to fund the research to support it, because we're honestly trying to get it covered by insurance at that level. So, when it comes to taking it and stabilizing it, like in the powder, you do have to mix it obviously with a liquid to take it. And even with babies, when I'm working with them, we have to mix it with something. So we just have people mix it with this 2 to 4 ounces of like tepid water or some type of liquid, and you just shoot it, take it that way. A lot of the case study people, they were just mixing it with their water and drinking it quickly. The longer it sits, it's going to start to clump up and it'll impact like the texture and things. And then you're losing that activity because you want it to be working in your body, not outside of your body. So when there is no other way to administer it other than a liquid, because we're working with a powder and we don't have a capsule to swallow, that's how we dose it. It's impossible to do gummies or even a liquid tincture for that exact reason, which stinks.
Yeah, there's limitations to, like, for everything that has positives, there's got to be something the other way too. But that is important because it impacts, right? Like there's some things we talked about today. I always try to layer this in whenever possible. It's just like the human experience, right? And like the things that we're going to bump up against. And that's my thought about these as well, is without a little supervision, it'd be easy for people to get disillusioned because you have to be committed to like X amount of time, right? And have specific symptoms you're trying to measure, and you've got to take
Yeah.
it properly, or as properly as possible. And then and I think I'm a case study nut. I always love like success stories and result stories just because I think it's funny because this overlaps in other things I'm working on right now, but the case studies give us hope, right? And we're fueled on hope. We're fueled on these. It gives us faith that might work for us. And that's like literally how the world goes around, right? Man, we just got started on this topic. I know you said maybe a follow-up interview on autoimmunity and cancer, which I think this is a good scratching the surface conversation to highlight like, okay, here's some conversation, big picture about enzymes that we haven't addressed from this angle whatsoever. Sourcing, we talked about, and then we got into how babies make enzymes and how mom's digestive capacity might affect babies. And then we also got into what I wanted to get into, which is using enzymes outside of food and what they can do, what are the possibilities there. So just got started on scratching that surface. And so thank you so much for that. I know we could keep talking for a half hour, but Amy, is there anything that you feel like if someone is listening to this and they're like, man, I think she's talking my language or something. Is there some kind of pearl or a thing? You've actually had a lot of good one-liners, not shocking for you, that comes to mind when talking about enzymes, trying to wrap it with a bow.
Yeah, I would just say enzyme wrapping up the enzyme, they make life possible. The way I look at enzymes versus anything else that we give people therapeutically is it's like building a house. You can have all the materials, you can have all the wood, all the nails, all the hammers, all the things you want, right? Think about it as like your vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all these different things that we supplement, herbs and whatnot. Enzymes are they're the construction workers, right? If you don't have the construction workers to put the house together, all of those materials are useless, right?
Yeah.
So that's really where enzymes, again, you can't peel the onion back any further, right? Now, my theory as to why our enzyme propensity is not what it should be, we've touched on, but I did want to also share with the listeners, if you've liked what you've heard today and you want to learn more about enzymes, we have tons of free education that you can check out. If you go to mycliniciantoolbox.com, you can view, we do a free webinar every month. I did one recently on the GLP-1s and the role of enzymes. I did one last month on whole food supplements and the difference between whole food and that, but really hitting on the digestive piece. But we have tons. We have our cancer on there, all the things. We also have a free workshop coming up for practitioners in the next few months. I can get you info on that. But that mycliniciantoolbox.com is a great place to access. That's where you can see our research, our protocols, our case studies, all of that is there. You won't find any of it on our actual website though, for FDA compliance reasons. So hopefully an FDA agent isn't listening to this podcast. I just told them where all our stuff is.
Yeah.
But if you go there, you can check out a lot of that information. And then if you'd like to get in touch with me to learn more, you can email me at clinic@tecenzymes.com. And we did want to provide a special code for your listeners to use. You can use less stressed, and that will get you 10% off anything you'd like to try. Another thing that's unique about us is we do offer clinical guidance to a degree, basically, where we do these quick little 10-minute enzyme assessments to get you started. If you're not working with a practitioner, or if you need additional support, we have that option as well. But yeah, that would be my last 2 cents there.
No, that was great. That was great because that was great because you gave us also like where can people find, XYZ thing. You gave us more. So my clinician toolbox and the code works on if you're going to try to purchase anything at Transformation End.
Mhm.
So awesome. Thank you
Yep.
so much for coming on today, Amy. You covered all of the essential things to wrap up the podcast. And I know we just got started, but it was so much fun to talk about this topic with you.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to visit with you.